Ready to dive into something totally different today. We're talking Nollywood, the Nigerian film industry that's taking the world by storm.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? This whole industry kind of exploded onto the scene.
It really did. But our sources actually trace its beginnings back to, let's see, the late 1980s.
Right around then. And one of the big catalysts was the availability of video technology. It became a lot more affordable, more accessible, and suddenly filmmaking was within reach for a lot more people.
It's like the perfect storm, right? That combined with a huge demand for entertainment, especially within Nigeria. And boom, you have the birth of a cinematic powerhouse.
Speaking of
Living in Bondage.
exactly. The film that really put Nollywood on the map.
1992, right?
That's the one. This thriller was like the shot heard around the Nigerian film world, and it was made for, get this, a shoestring budget of just $1,000. Can you believe that?
Seriously, $1,000. And it became this massive, massive hit.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking almost $140,000 in profit. But it wasn't just about the money, It sparked this whole cultural phenomenon. Suddenly, everyone wanted in on the action.
Right, and that's what I find so fascinating about Nollywood. It's this we can do this too mentality. It's about ingenuity, resourcefulness, and this incredible drive to tell their stories no matter what. And now look at it, churning out something like 2,000 films every year.
2000, that's on par with Bollywood in terms of sheer volume.
It's mind-blowing. But that leads us to this constant debate, the whole quantity versus quality argument.
Yeah, it's something that comes up a lot in the research. Critics say that rapid production and, let's face it, often limited budgets sometimes come at the expense of artistic value.
It's a valid point. But then again, isn't there something to be said for this, I don't know, this almost scrappy approach, this making it work attitude?
Absolutely. In fact, many argue that it's actually a form of innovation. These filmmakers, they're masters of improvisation. They find these ingenious ways to tell captivating stories, often with very little to work with.
Turning limitations into strengths, almost. And that takes us to something even more complex. How Nollywood portrays Nigerian culture. What kind of picture does it paint? Is it accurate? Stereotypical?
Right. Alessandra Jodlowski, a scholar who's written extensively on this topic, points out that there's a whole spectrum of opinions on this. You have prominent Nigerian intellectuals like playwright Femi Osofizan.
Oh, I've read some of this work.
So, he's not afraid to voice his concerns. He argues that Nollywood needs to be more nuanced, especially when it comes to things like religion and traditional beliefs.
Interesting. So he's worried about the perpetuation of stereotypes, particularly for a global audience.
Exactly. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have someone like Odia Ofemun, the poet and essayist.
Right.
And his take is that, yes, Nollywood might have its flaws, but offers this raw, unfiltered look at Nigerian society, this messiness, he calls it, this high tension that's very much a part of everyday life there.
So it's about reflecting reality versus perpetuating potentially harmful stereotypes. It's complicated. And it becomes even more layered when you consider Nollywood's massive global audience. We're talking millions of viewers worldwide.
Huge, and platforms like Iroko TV, they've been essential for reaching these audiences.
The Oko TV.
It's often called the Netflix of Africa.
Ah, okay. I can see how that's had a huge impact.
Absolutely. It's given Nollywood this global stage, which is fascinating, but it also raises questions about cultural identity and how these films are perceived outside of Nigeria.
It's interesting how even the very name Nollywood has sparked debate.
It has. Some see it as this label imposed from the outside, almost.
Like it's trying to fit into a Hollywood-shaped box.
Exactly. And some Nigerian filmmakers, they feel like, hold on, we have our own rich history of storytelling that predates this label.
And they're not wrong.
Not at all. And they're concerned that by focusing solely on the Nollywood label, we risk overlooking the nuances and individual identities within the industry.
Right. Like if we just lumped all European cinema into one big Eurowood category, we'd miss out on so much richness and diversity.
Exactly. And within Nigeria, you also have Kannywood and Yoruwood, referring to Hausa language and Yoruba language cinema.
So it's about recognizing that Nollywood is an umbrella term, and it's important to acknowledge and celebrate the individual parts that make it up.
Absolutely. And speaking of challenges, we can't forget about piracy, which is a huge issue facing the industry today.
And it's not just about stealing movies, right? Piracy has this whole ripple effect.
It really does. I mean, On the one hand, it shows just how much these films resonate with people. They're going out of their way to see them, even if it means, well,
Bending the rules a bit.
exactly. But that comes at a cost. There's an article in Finance and Development, that's the IMF publication, and they cite this staggering statistic.
Ooh.
For every single legitimate copy of a Nollywood film sold, a staggering 9 are pirated. 9.
Wow. That's hard to even fathom. The lost revenue. I mean,
It's enormous. And it's not just the filmmakers themselves who feel the impact. It's the producers, the distributors, everyone involved in getting those films out there. And then, of course, there's the issue of quality control, which is
right, because how can you even begin to, like, police that
right.
when there are so many, I don't know, unofficial versions floating around?
It's almost impossible. You'd think piracy on that scale would completely cripple the industry. But from what we've read, Nollywood just seems to, I don't know, roll with the punches.
That's that resilience we were talking about, right?
Exactly. There's this constant adaptation, this finding creative solutions. It's actually quite remarkable.
It makes you wonder, though, with technology constantly evolving, audience expectations shifting. I mean, how does Nollywood keep up?
That's the question, isn't it? And it seems like part of the answer is to embrace those changes. We're seeing a real shift towards higher production values, for example,
Yeah.
experimenting with different genres. And then you have these...
Like these international collaborations, I've heard about some of those.
Sure. Exactly. It's almost like a new generation of filmmakers is emerging, one that's grown up with digital technology, with a global audience, and they're not afraid to, shake things up a bit.
It's exciting. But it also brings us back to that earlier question. What is Nollywood? Is it even possible to define it neatly anymore?
Right. It's this constantly evolving thing, this fusion of tradition and innovation.
And despite all the challenges, the debates, the piracy issues, Nollywood continues to thrive.
Absolutely. It's captivating audiences. It's shaping cultural conversations, both within Nigeria and beyond.
And that's what's so compelling. It's a story of resourcefulness, of turning challenges into opportunities, that entrepreneurial spirit we talked about. That's at the very heart of what Nollywood is all about.
It really is. And it's not just about, business savvy. These films, they tap into something deeper. This need for representation, for stories that resonate with a particularly African experience.
And those themes, family, community, spirituality, those are universal.
Yeah.
But they're presented through this uniquely Nigerian lens.
Exactly. And I think that's what gives Nollywood its power. It feels authentic. It feels relatable. It's a perspective we don't often see on the global stage.
But even with all this success, it feels like Nollywood is at a crossroads.
It does, doesn't it?
Can it hold on to its roots, this kind of scrappy, independent spirit,
Yeah.
while also embracing these new opportunities, these global aspirations?
It's a balancing act for sure. Can they combat piracy while still making films accessible? Can they embrace higher production values without losing that distinct Nollywood feel? These are big questions.
They are. And it makes you realize that Nollywood's story, it's not just about entertainment.
No, it's not.
It reflects these larger questions about globalization, about cultural identity, about the future of storytelling in this, rapidly changing world.
It's a fascinating microcosm of so many of the trends we're seeing today.
It really is. So to our listeners, we leave you with this. Pay attention to Nollywood. It's a case study in resilience, in innovation, and in the power of authentic storytelling.
And who knows, maybe it even holds the key to a new kind of global cinema, one that's more diverse, more representative, and ultimately more reflective of the world we live in today.
It's like we're witnessing this incredible evolution in real time.
It really is. And it's that interplay between honoring the past and embracing the future that makes it so fascinating,
Totally. You have this rich history of storytelling, those traditions.
And then these new voices coming in with fresh perspectives, new tools at their disposal. It's exciting.
It really is. And they're not afraid to push those boundaries, experiment with different genres. Right?
Absolutely. They're redefining what a Nollywood film can even be. And I think it goes back to that core human need for representation.
To see ourselves reflected in the stories we watch, the stories we hear.
Exactly. And not just reflected, but to challenge those preconceived notions. Nollywood gives us this window into a culture that I think it's safe to say often gets misunderstood, misrepresented.
Right. It's about taking control of the narrative.
Mm-hmm. Owning it, telling those stories from a perspective that feels real, authentic.
And that's powerful to be able to share that with the world. And it's sparking important conversations, wouldn't you say? Challenging assumptions.
It is. And ultimately, I think fostering a deeper understanding of this culture, this incredibly vibrant, complex culture that is Nigeria today.
It's been amazing to trace Nollywood's journey,
Mm.
from those early days, just figuring things out, to this global phenomenon. And honestly, I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
Oh, for sure. This is an industry that's just bursting with creativity, with potential. I can't wait to see what they do next.
So to our listeners, if you haven't already, dive into the world of Nollywood.
You won't regret it. You might be surprised by what you find. It's a reminder that great stories can come from anywhere, and that sometimes the most unexpected places hold the most incredible surprises.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure, as always.